All right, we look to be live again. I will quickly post the link for everybody. All right, here we go. So I've taken to posting on, maybe previously I was preferencing the YouTube live link, but I've switched over to the Twitter live link because I seem to get more viewers there. So you got to go where appreciation is also visible on YouTube as well for folks that prefer the YouTube channel, but somehow Twitter seems better for me. Happy Monday, everybody. I am on the tail end, I think, of some fairly intense jet lag. I spent 10-ish days in Dubai. It's my first time in Dubai. It's kind of feel like unusual for a long-time crypto person, perhaps. Although I do know plenty of people who have just recently gone or never been. But so I'll go into some of those impressions. I want to talk about the conference first, to the extent that I can, and then close on some of the physical security discussion that, while is making the rounds for unfortunate reasons, but it's good that it's being discussed. So I'll weigh in a little bit there. So Satoshi Roundtable. So Satoshi Roundtable is an excellent conference. It is pretty private. It is at least nominally invite only. So I think, probably if you know someone who has gone there and you are a person in the space, I would say the fee is reasonably significant. It's kind of set up as an all-inclusive, if you do it that way, thing. So there was a hotel buyout this year, and I think in previous years. And so everyone at the hotel is either working for the hotel or a conference member, which makes it sort of like a very intense, in a good way, experience. And you would, expect that to be maybe not inexpensive. I think, one of my colleagues has said that most crypto conferences have gotten a little bit too big. I'm thinking the major ones see, 20,000 people, I think, at Token 2049. Fewer at DevCon. I've kind of been alternating with co-founders on the big conferences. I'm not sure where consensus is these days, but kind of similar, like huge numbers of people, which is quite good from an economies of scale perspective, good for the conference organizer. But I tend to find that it becomes a little bit too noisy to get things done. When you're going into a conference, or when I'm going to a conference, I have a couple goals. One, see people I already know, strengthen relationships. That's a lot of what you do. Meet some number of net new people. Although, I kind of find conferences can be a little too spammy that way. Like, I think you want to go quality over quantity with outreach. I've never been a big booth believer, for instance. I think booths are probably more about brand preservation than getting anything. And so we've done them in the past. We do them, but it's I don't think you're going to make huge step function changes with running kind of a traditional marketing playbook. And again, this sort of benefits the people who want your marketing dollars. I think high quality connections, maybe smaller in number, are sort of the big thing, and that's what Roundtable was really good at. So something like 400 or 500 people in the Telegram, so still pretty big, but just way smaller than these 20,000 person conferences with 200 side events. And I probably knew, I don't know, 15 people who went to the conference ahead of time, maybe more. It had something of an OG energy to it. People I hadn't seen in maybe in a couple cases in a decade. Certainly Bitcoin heavy. So Satoshi's Roundtable's not quite a maxi conference. You had a fair bit of representation from more like Ethereum aligned or Solana folks, but heavily, in the Bitcoin demographic. I think there's definitely time-wise a demarcation line between the personalities you've had in crypto, where prior to, I'm going to say 2017, you had kind of techies who are into the protocol, the theory, writing the software, and all of that, and freedom fighters, often those being represented in the same person, but not always. And I'm going to say around 2017, really when ICOs took off, you had a lot more of the kind of financial speculator demographic that maybe you used to find in Wall Street, maybe you still do, but I imagine you found a lot of in like the Wild West 80s, as depicted in movies like Wall Street and so on, and some outright scammers. I think it being a bit of a Bitcoin maxi conference, Bitcoin people still sort of think that everything other than Bitcoin is dust to some degree. And obviously Bitcoin will always be first and may for a very long time, maybe, for the foreseeable future, always be the highest cap asset. You kind of see that with gold. I mean, gold is just still, although I do think Bitcoin flips gold maybe within a decade, maybe less, maybe, something like that. That there's an enduring power of sentiment that, Bitcoin was first and is unique. Mostly doesn't really have a team around it these days, has it achieved a greater degree of decentralization even than other really popular protocols. And so it was, funny in that there was a bit of a, what I would say, also like a retiree aspect to it. People have done very well on Bitcoin. By the way, security was very tight at the conference. Of course, in part for this reason, always showing the wristband in and out. And it's part of the reason for the total buyout, too. People who just believe that Bitcoin is the best and will continue to be the best, may not do so much from here if you're holding a lot of Bitcoin, and power to them, right? The kind of a related phenomenon. There was a good session, and I think that all the information is shareable. It's not shareable, attributable back to people. So I'm trying to make sure I get my invite back for next year, and not betray any confidence or anything. But there's a good session on how to acquire different passports, and so I think Americans by and large don't do this. There are a handful like the Eduardo Saverins, Roger Ver later, who's a crypto guy example, but where Americans do actually renounce their citizenship for one reason or another. But it seems not that common. We're also I would say fairly physically isolated. I think that's part of it, and obviously still, a major global power, and a lot of people at the conference, especially those that were not Americans, seemed to be more global citizens. 3 passports, 4 passports, living between Hong Kong and Dubai and France and wherever. But there's the sense, and of course, it's like partially for tax treatment, but also there's, I think, fear of persecution that causes these people to try to hedge their interests and live in a pretty location independent manner. It made me feel that we're kind of isolated in the US because, again, very few people I know, even those who are very successful, go to these lengths. There's kind of there's a Puerto Rico contingent, which lots of people in crypto have done. Of course, that you can get good tax treatment and keep your U.S. citizenship, although there's a big residency requirement, I believe. But I think the majority of mega successful people, even in crypto, who are Americans, just keep the citizenship, even despite its global taxation and whatnot. But it doesn't seem like it's the case elsewhere. It seems like people really kind of bop around if they're from Europe or Asia, and they're just much more willing to jurisdiction hop that I've seen from Americans, which was interesting. I think it's maybe the rest of the world feels sort of closer to the rest of the world somehow, but also there's uniqueness in the way our laws work and so on. There's really good privacy session. I'll dig into more of that a little bit later. The whole format is sort of unconference. So, basically, for one, there's a no shilling rule, so to speak, which I think one was adhered to as compared with all other crypto conferences. It's way less intense. At the same time, lots of the conference sessions were, in one way or another, an advertisement for the person's services. There was some good real-world asset stuff that I participated in because we do real-world assets, but maybe some of the people hosting those sessions were also in real-world assets. And so they tend to be leading with information. So kind of like a soft sell, if you will. There are investor sessions where the investors give advice, and some of the founders came and listened to that advice, and maybe the investors in the end are a little bit marketing their dollars. It was very soft. It was all good stuff. But I think it's kind of everyone asks what you do pretty quickly. People are eager to make partnerships. These are, like I said, pretty high quality contacts. Everyone feels comfortable around each other in this more vetted kind of closed environment than maybe elsewhere. The unconference format was good that way. I think a lot of knowledge in the people there, beyond sort of a scheduled format where you're like a lot of the talks are sponsor talks and so on. That the information was much higher quality. I also, had the feeling it is generally the case, probably both in crypto and in the real world, that big and deep pockets get into things first, and you sort of see why. One, you need time to get into things early. So a bunch of the folks I met were maybe professional angel investors, but actually pretty involved with projects. There's a big sourcing question. There's so many crypto projects. How do you find the good ones? And one of the people I talked to, the answer is actually just like getting involved in the community and checking stuff out. A lot of people at the conference will ask like, okay, like you got a token? If not, when? There's a whole lot of interest there. And I think regular people just have a harder time tracking all of this stuff, right? It's like if you really have a day job, you're going to hear about things much later than people who can make this their job, which is pretty interesting. The I expect there to be lots more interesting mechanisms to encourage, let's say, Bitcoin purchasing activity as we go forward. The MicroStrategy, and maybe other tokens too. The MicroStrategy strategy, where basically they're using cheap money to buy Bitcoin, seems to be duplicated, at least in one other case. Some of the folks having set up public companies to do so, where the effective price the investor is paying for a Bitcoin is significantly more than that Bitcoin, and you can then roll the difference into buying more Bitcoin. So I expect to see sort of more of this. And again, this was covered kind of as part of the Maxi theme of the conference. People there, going back to the sort of global citizen point, some of the people at the conference and maybe in Dubai in general seem a little bit like political prisoners, or people will quietly express that there's some reason that they can't go back to their home country. Either, like maybe the tamest being something like a conscientious objector status, all the way up to more intense stuff having to do with crypto activity and not knowing what the treatment of that would be. Pretty common at the conference. So, and this is maybe a good transition into Dubai as a place. It almost feels like there are very successful refugees, both at the conference and in Dubai in general. So into Dubai, I liked it. My first time there, quite different place than I'm used to. It's good to see as much as one can of the sort of rest of the world, to kind of see like what's better, what's worse. And like I said, I feel we're kind of isolated in the U.S. It's a vast country with lots of stuff, and kind of far from other ones, other than Canada and Mexico, which are also quite large, by landmass. So you really got to travel a distance to see something quite wildly different from the U.S. But they're building. There are many areas of Dubai with a huge number of giant skyscrapers. There's a ton of construction going on. They have the tallest building in the world. Took a picture of it from the base. It's kind of like you really have to crane your neck back to see the top of it. It makes me. There are obviously policies that the government has decided on to make this happen. I kind of think the sense you get from the interactions with the government, which there actually were a couple. Some government folks were at the conference trying to encourage crypto business activity in Dubai. Is that it wants the country to be great, and is sort of planning, I would say, pretty reasonable, at least according to its strategy, policy prescriptions to make that happen. You can imagine if they have like a real estate permitting office, which I'm sure they do, that the people in there are you've got some deep-pocketed developers presenting a plan for like an 80-story skyscraper, and they're like, can we make it bigger? Can we get an Olympic-sized swimming pool in there? Where the U.S. equivalent, it feels like you're fighting for, and I've not done this myself, it's just the sense I get from lots of local government, that you're fighting for every inch of the right to build things, buildings and otherwise. And it's not exactly clear why. It's a lot of that is local. So some people just don't want there to be a lot of construction near their house, or they're worried about their property value. Some of that is federal regulatory, the reasons maybe are not that important for this discussion, but it's clear that not a lot of that is happening in Dubai, and that the government is trying to put the thumb on the scale as much as possible to build a lot there and take some of the advantages they have and roll that into different successful industry. So in terms of size of the place, so I spent a lot of my time in Miami. It's interestingly about Dubai as a whole is about the same size and population, roughly, as Miami-Dade County, within, let's say, 20% on both. And I guess maybe it was due to where I was staying. It feels denser. Perhaps like where the big buildings are is probably denser than peak Miami density, which is probably in like Brickell or downtown. But perhaps it gets, I didn't spend that much time in the outskirts, though I did visit the desert, which was cool. Touristy thing to do, but fun. Have some good camel footage. Wild camels, actually, which we didn't know was a little dangerous. And, rode some buggies and all that sort of thing. So, it's interesting. It both feels quite big and not so big at the same time. I'd say people are pretty warm. They're, all my interactions with locals were pretty friendly. There's definitely something of a quite visible, I guess I would call it, caste system. So I believe that it is largely the case that, it's let's say extremely difficult to get Dubai citizenship. If I don't know exactly how it happens. So a lot of the people you'll meet there are guests of some kind, and it's very friendly for certain types of guests. There are, golden visas that are pretty generous in terms of like what they require of you, and long in terms of time, fast to process if you're working in an area that folks like. And there's other guest labor programs that are probably less generous. And so you see all this construction, and you have to imagine that probably it's mostly done by guest labor. Also, just I was at this conference in this nice hotel, and just the feeling in dealing with the staff is that it's a little too polite, and almost to the point of obsequiousness. And I think Americans just don't like it this way. Like when we interact with service people, obviously we still have our status and something of a class system, but you tend to be, we all vote, right? You tend to feel like you're dealing with equals, where something somewhere in Dubai is enforcing this feeling like that there are just distinct and not really intermingling social classes. And it's odd, it's odd for an American, I guess. I've heard, the UK is a little like this too. Like they have a pretty pronounced and kind of static class system, which I've not spent quite enough time there to really observe firsthand. So it's not necessarily because it's monarchy or anything, but this is a weird thing about it. I would say in the a bunch of us spent a little bit of time kind of off campus, out and about, and I would say you definitely observe an apparent contradiction between the quite conservative, Muslim values of the country, and then what you see out there. It's odd and interesting, and I suspect some sort of business decision was been made at some point about what to tolerate to achieve the goal of bringing in lots of capital and then eventually innovation and so on. And what that then requires of blind eyes and that sort of thing. So in terms of like places that it's similar to, it did feel a lot like Singapore, a little more chill than Singapore. Singapore also has like this like sort of like ruthless competence feel to it that was there, but not to the same degree. Like things are a little more loosey goosey is not the right word, but sometimes you have to like inquire on things a couple of times. In Dubai, feels completely safe. I would observe people many times. People leave a nice purse, their drink, whatever, go walk away, come back, and no one is worried at all about that sort of thing. So good place to do a conference with some high profile people. Definitely feels surveilled. Lots of cameras. It was in a couple different hotels in my 10 days, and one of them, like in the hotel gym, the camera was like, I was like on a treadmill, and the camera was like right there. It's like, ooh, wow, this is close. And they, on entry to the country, they offer a free SIM card with 50 gigabytes of whatever download or whatever it is, and just like, not sure I will use the SIM card. I don't get a negative intention from the surveillance. I think it probably, like, the people who have made this decision really just want the crime to be zero, where I'm sort of very skeptical of our probably equally sophisticated, more hidden surveillance apparatus in the US. So I think we've just seen the purpose is different, but nevertheless, I don't like it. The food was good, better than I thought it would be. Good mix. I would say, like in Miami, maybe skewing towards the high end. I actually, my preference is very tasty, hole in the wall food, as opposed to fancy food. And at least maybe it was a tourist thing. The fancy food is more visible. I like Dubai breakfast. It's almost like Israeli breakfast, although they got like some UK elements to it. They tend to serve baked beans, which is sort of funny to me. Super clean. I don't know how it is so clean. I guess it's all new, so we'll have to see in 10, 20, 30 years whether it continues to feel so clean. But it could just be low labor costs. Like they're cleaning all the time, it seems. Singapore is like that too. It seemed even cleaner than Singapore. Somehow. So wish it were more walkable. I was staying in different places. There is a bit of it that is walkable, but mostly the walkable parts are like either indoor or outdoor malls. The Dubai Mall is like the biggest thing ever. It's gigantic. And then there are like there's the DIFC. It must be Dubai International Financial Center is my guess. I don't know what it actually stands for. Where there's a bunch of high-end restaurants, but also some office space, some very nice offices. I visited one of them, or at least it was very close to there. I'm not sure it was formally in the square, if you will. So you can walk around those areas, but between areas of sort of retail activity, it's pretty hard to walk. And I think they actually could design it. They could have designed it so there are more walking paths and or biking paths and all that sort of thing, and haven't done so. So that's a little bit too bad. And yeah, definitely has a dark side, the place. I could see, especially folks, a lot of the folks who are moving there are pretty successful and doing it in part for tax treatment. And then there's just like plenty of places to then go spend those dollars in sort of whatever way you like. And I could, it's especially, you can imagine like someone who had exited or something and, isn't super day-to-day busy getting, involved in all manner of that. So, an interesting aspect of the place. But, in terms of what the U.S. can learn from Dubai is that, I think we're seeing it right now that sort of like leadership matters. I think it is a place that cares about its citizens and has made some, hard-headed decisions on kind of what's good for them. And we'll see how it shakes out over the years, but there's definitely a boom going on there. A lot of crypto business there. I know I also met a bunch of people at the conference who seem to have somewhat recently moved to Dubai, like last couple years. So I think they're definitely doing a good job at making it easy to operate, having good financial incentives, but also just like a kind of an open door to the powers that be. Really goes a long way, it seems. And this might be an unpopular thing to say in any sort of normal media in the U.S., but we might actually want to be easier on the rich and super rich here. I'm just like observing this construction boom, and you'd imagine that something similar could happen in the U.S. if sort of two things happened. One, it was easier to build stuff. Two, if there's demand for what's going to be built. Like they're building so much in Dubai. I think someone has, sensibly done a calculation, and it's not like these, high-end condo units are going to sit empty. Like they know people are moving in, and that's why they're building all this stuff. And so you can imagine, like say, I don't know how the tax breakdown is. Say you kept everything else the same in the US, but got rid of the capital gains tax, which places like Dubai, Singapore, et cetera, don't have. And I think they do have income taxes. So like maybe, I don't know what impact that would have on our tax base, but let's say it wasn't that significant. It might actually be compensated by the economic activity that comes from the people that attracts, then getting cycled back into businesses and, their income taxes and sales taxes and so on. One person told me, it was a Dubai resident, doesn't even have to file taxes, which is remarkable. Like it's also so many years, so many hours per year that go into that in the US that like I don't think the US will quite ever do what I'm describing, but you might actually want to do that if you were like a policy bureaucrat of some kind. Might be quite unpopular, but in terms of like the productivity it might cause against the, let's say, net loss of tax revenue, it might be worthwhile because despite what you hear, taxes are pretty progressive in the United States, and you can see there's just capital flowing in. It's so visually obvious that we might be better served to make maybe a more limited form of similar decisions, because obviously the U.S. is in many other ways a more attractive destination than Dubai, right? Like they have to go pretty extreme with the policies to bring people in. Whereas, lots of people on the planet want to be U.S. citizens. And so I think, we can play a little harder to get is what we do, but it might be misguided. Anyways, Dubai, cool place. I'm sure I'll return. A lot of crypto business going on. There's an optimism there too. I think we took a meetup. One thing that's interesting about it also, I was about to change topics. I was in a bunch of pictures in Dubai that people insisted were just for private enjoyment, private, use only. And in the US, like if you're in a picture, you just sort of assume it's going on the internet. So I like this about this place. They care, at least someone cares about privacy there. And I think that's part of the theme of the whole thing. Right. On to physical security with bearer assets. So part of the promise of the crypto world is that, you're able to really have control over the things you own. This is mostly a good thing, and is in some ways almost the whole point. On the other hand, bearer assets are a little scary. Like if you started broadcasting that you have lots and lots of cash in your house, you might attract interest. from the wrong sort of folks who want some of that cash in your house. And this is seeming to be increasingly common. So there was a good episode on Unchained with Laura Shin, I believe, and Jameson-Lubin about this issue recently. The most recent high-profile incident was one of the co-founders of Ledger was targeted, kidnapped, disfigured. I think a finger was cut off to attempt to extort crypto assets, actually from someone else, not him directly. So, it's scary, right? The transfers are irreversible. So if you're a person that people reasonably believe have a lot of crypto, or are close to people reasonably believe have a lot of crypto, it's probably worth some thought on how best to deal with physical security. And I also have heard about incidents that haven't made public media that weren't high profile people necessarily, and look more like tips. It does seem like these are organized efforts. Again, in the Ledger case, 10 plus people were arrested in connection with the kidnapping, etc. And I've heard, various organized crime rings are the ones maybe best at this. So going back to the conference for a bit, there was a good security session. The big thing I took away from it was that probably your biggest enemy as a person trying to stay physically secure is your phone. The statistic I was quoted was, it could be as low as $5 to bribe someone at the phone company to give away your physical location. It's fairly easy to get people's phone numbers, and if the phone is on you, there's a cell tower. It can locate you to probably within feet. It probably depends on the technology that you're using, but really close, right? GPS is pretty good these days. Also, things like we use Bluetooth devices, which I do. These further act as beacons that can physically locate you. So I think the number one advice was to sort of start to limit the influence of the phone. Go to things like Google Voice for one, and delete apps which broadcast your location. Lots of them do. And maybe even consider going to a different phone operating system that's more locked down. So the phone, probably number one enemy. Obviously, number two is like being visible and flashy and all that sort of thing. Some of the people at the conference that I hadn't seen in a long time have relatively little web presence. I don't know how they did it, but good for them. In that, people who've been around for a long time, who you suspect have done well, and are quite hard to Google. Sort of good on them for sure. But yeah, so you can go to the links of, again, installing, and I'm forgetting the name right now, but privacy-focused operating system on a kind of Android-derived phones, and really locking down the apps available. One of the things that's interesting is that I always sometimes I even find if I say something near the phone, but especially like if I Google something, or even maybe type it in some other medium, I'll sort of immediately start seeing ads on different channels for it, like Instagram, for instance. And it's because if you look into the ad tech world, the data aggregation on all of us is kind of crazy and in some ways spectacular. Like I do think it's a good thing theoretically that our preferences are aggregated so that, if you're going to buy something, it might be something that you want. But the privacy aspects of it are really bad in that, it feels like all of these services are now coordinating amongst each other in a sense to provide your info, aggregate it, and sell it back to would-be advertisers. There are SDKs where, let's say an app like a Yelp or something. I'm not saying that they do this, but is nominally about like looking up restaurants here or there, but might have some amount of geolocation in it, then has this geolocation data sold to people for a different purpose. So the apps are probably are the enemy after the phone itself, as far as physical security goes. It does seem like these incidents skew developing world, like Thailand. You hear a bunch. Lots of crypto people seem to like Thailand, but obviously the one happened in France. That did happen. I hear about them in the U.S. too, that they're spoken of less, perhaps, but they're definitely going on. There are kidnappings, there are home invasions. I think in the U.S. you probably want to have the extent of a security posture that you're allowed by your state, et cetera. And I've gone to some of these lengths myself. There are definitely firms that can help with this. It's a holistic thing, having a security posture. You both want to not lose assets if you are in one of these situations, and you'll assume that you would comply with anything someone says, though some asset loss may just happen. I think so. Here, like in Mexico, for instance, it seems to be the norm for the well-to-do to have family members kidnapped, and it's just like once a year, once every couple of years things, and there's market fees for it. Market just meaning that the fees are sort of known, right? And that's just a part of how that society is. We don't really have it in the U.S., but the vast monetization, capability of crypto is making it more tempting, perhaps, for these folks. So you can ask sort of whether, is it really about crypto? And the answer is definitely significantly it is, but also it's just how effective law enforcement is at preventing and or creating consequences with these incidents later. There have been other high-profile incidents. There's I forget which CEO, but in Toronto there was that home invasion. And then again, I just hear about them sometimes on Twitter, unattributed. You don't know who it is, but privately as well. I think if you know enough people in crypto, a friend of a friend will have had some incident like this. So it's something really to worry about. As much as I want privacy, for someone, it's definitely possible to be a public person and a private person in the same way. And I'm not mega public, but I'm pretty public already, and I expect to be more so over time. There does feel like a little bit of a contradiction in terms there. I mean, if you think about someone like the president, he just has like a big security detail. Things are meticulously planned, but there's no attempt to disappear, right? I think you probably want some aspects of your life to be as invisible as possible, but to know also that it's difficult at times. Like I think at some point in the run up to the last election, there was a dossier that was leaked on Twitter, and the Twitter people banned the person who leaked the dossier because it contained J.D. Vance's home address, which is, I suppose, easy to Google. That was said at the time. And so, but that's interesting. Like if the vice president's home address is like on the internet, and maybe he's not there all the time and so on. In some ways, the the security by obscurity posture may not work. And I kind of feel like that's what privacy is. It works if you commit to that lifestyle. But if you're like going to conferences all the time, speaking, pretty social person, etc., which I'm maybe am, you maybe want like a mix of strategies. I don't expect to have like a personal security detail soon. I know some people do that if they're high profile enough. But I think, some amount of deterrence, a different kind of deterrence may be required as well. And that, if you probably don't want to be the person a kidnapper would target out of all of them, right? Like, there should be a sense that it's a difficult one that may cause you to face consequences as a would-be kidnapper as compared with any of the other options. And this is a kind of more of a public posture you might take as opposed to a purely by obscurity posture. You probably want a bit of both. I'll end up continuing to think about this issue for a little bit. Maybe I'll, as I learn more, I'll kind of cover this again. But it was definitely on my mind, both because of that great session and because of the sort of people there who are seemingly applying all of this in their own lives already, both from a kind of mobility, moving from place to place perspective, but again, also privately, some of this has been communicated, and kind of maybe the most successful people are the quietest and spent the most time thinking about it. So, to date hasn't been such a big deal for me, but you hear enough, you get worried, and we should all be investing in physical security, not trying to get the wrong kind of attention, but also being prepared if you do. That's a good stopping point. But happy to be back. I try to do these weekly. I didn't manage to get it done in the last week because of conference jet lag, all that sort of thing. But I'll try to keep them largely weekly as we go here. Look at this. While we are closing, good 73, 74 viewers. That's pretty solid. These keep going up week over week, it seems. So happy about that. Maybe the algorithm is doing a good job. There's some demand for this content, which I'm pleased by, and it's spreading. If you didn't catch the beginning, they auto save, of course, on Twitter and YouTube. So I'm just going to end it right here, and you'll be able to watch the whole thing. So yeah, Roundtable was awesome. Dubai, cool and crazy place. Be safe with your bearer assets. And thanks, everybody.